Travel is more than just ticking off countries. It's about the people, the culture, the food, the moments. I'm Pippa Hudson, and on Wonder the World, I invite you to join me every week as we explore destinations both near and far, with the help of fellow adventurers who share their unique travel stories. Listen to my podcast wherever you get them.
Clement Manyathela.
7:02. Let's walk the talk.
It's 19 minutes before 11 o'clock. We've got Rick Raubenheimer on the line now. Thank you so much, Rick, for making time for us. Good morning.
And good to speak to you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. So let's start maybe with some definitions so that some of our listeners who may be confused about what's what can understand. What's the difference between atheists and people who consider themselves agnostics?
Atheists do not believe in the supernatural, which includes fairies, goblins, angels, devils, and, amongst other things, gods. Agnostics tend to be more fence-sitters, saying that they don't know one way or the other, or don't believe one way or the other, whether there is a God or not, or gods or not.
Okay. So what
now,
do atheists... Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
In practice, I've never come across an agnostic who goes to the synagogue, goes to the mosque, goes to churches, goes to temples and so on, just in case to hedge their bets. So in practice, agnostics tend to behave like atheists in their day-to-day life. They just don't profess that there is a God or not. Sorry to interrupt.
Okay. So what do they believe then about, especially and other seculars generally, what do they define or perceive the concept of the afterlife?
Well, atheists, agnostics, free thinkers, non-believers, etc., we go by many labels, tend to base our beliefs on reason and science. Now, science has not shown any evidence that there is an afterlife. There's a lot of anecdotal evidence, but this could merely be the brain under stress as the person is dying. We talk about near-death experiences and so on. And, of course, if you look at the various religions, and you'll have seen this over the past weeks in this slot, there are so many different beliefs about what happens after death that they cannot all be right. They could, on the other hand, all be wrong. Anyway, so with science having shown no evidence that there is an afterlife of any sort, atheists and the various categories that people like to put themselves into, we tend to accept that death is the end of life, the end of our existence as a thinking entity. Our elements will go back to the earth, back into circulation, but no consciousness remains, and we will have no awareness or existence after death.
When you say back to circulation, what do you mean by that?
Well, we're made of elements that come from the earth, and those elements will be used for other things. The body will decay or will be cremated, and all its constituent molecules will be used by other things. So they could become a flower or a train or anything, really, but those molecules will no longer be associated with us as a thinking being.
And do agnostics and atheists approach or even believe in consciousness, the idea of consciousness and the soul, and how do they approach questions of consciousness and the soul?
As far as we can tell from science, consciousness is a function of the brain. We've seen in medical, not experiments, but medical accidents, shall we say, where people have had damage to their brains, the consciousness can be similarly damaged. And as far as we know, when brain function stops, consciousness disappears. So there seems to be nothing in the way of a soul that would continue to exist after we die.
Mm-hmm. The belief systems that we've looked at over the last couple of weeks, they may, as you said, different interpretations of what happens after life. But what I found to sort of be common in most is this belief in reward or punishment in the afterlife. How do atheists or agnostics determine even moral or ethical behavior in the absence of that? Because it's almost like, from the people I've interviewed over the last couple of weeks, it's almost like, the idea that there can be a reward or there is punishment in the afterlife then also shapes how we live now.
Yes, well, generally speaking, atheists, and I would say agnostics as well, we try to behave morally in this life. We don't expect a reward or a punishment afterwards. In fact, I think this is actually a more moral way to live, because if the only reason you're not killing me and stealing my stuff is because you're afraid that God will punish you, then I would be very worried about if you were to stop believing in a God. But essentially, it's an evolutionary thing. We've evolved to be creatures with empathy, creatures who live socially. Generally speaking, somebody who wasn't willing to be kind to their neighbor would not do very well. And so evolution has shaped us such that we are moral beings, with or without the concept of a supernatural hereafter.
Mm-hmm. Okay, it's 12 minutes now before 11 o'clock. I want to bring in some questions from some of our listeners on 011-883-0702. What do you believe about the afterlife? We are now speaking to Rick Raubenheimer, who's the president of the South African Secular Society. Maybe there's clarity that you need in as far as atheists or agnostics beliefs are concerned. Are you perhaps someone who doesn't subscribe to any religion? Maybe you are atheist, maybe you are agnostic. What have you been thinking about that? Have you even been thinking about that? Give us your thoughts on 011-883-0702. If you've got questions for Rick as well, you can bring them on the WhatsApp line on 072-702-1702. We'll start with them after this.
702. The Clement Manyathela Show.
Let's walk the talk.
All right, it's 9 minutes now before 10 o'clock. I've got some of your questions on 011-883-0702. The WhatsApp line is 072-702-1702. Renita says, Clement, I love this guy you're speaking to. Very moral people, as they are naturally good people. They do not have to be threatened by hell. And speaking of that, Rick, this person says it's great that, you know, there are people who are not threatened by hell because they want to do good. And as you said, you guys do not absolutely believe in that concept of an afterlife, whether it's a heaven, whether it's a hell out there. You believe we respond to things now because just generally that's how we've evolved as a people. Rick, are you there?
Comment on that? Yes.
Yes. I wanted to
comment on that.
Yes. Especially what Renita says, that he loves how you're describing that issue of just the moral authority or moral standing, and says he likes the fact that you don't have to be threatened by hell, basically, in order to do good.
Yes, well, that puts it in a nutshell, yes. Whether it's a threat of hell or a promise of heaven, but neither, as far as we know, do exist. So, but it's in our human nature to be moral people.
Mm-hmm. Here's a WhatsApp voice note that also come through.
Hi, Clement. I'm an atheist to the core. When you die, you go nowhere. We bury you and you are eaten by worms. That's the end of it. No spirits, nothing. Hi.
All right. Thank you so much for that. Someone is asking here, Rick. Hi, Clement. Please, can you ask Rick, how do atheists and agnostics emotionally cope with the loss of loved ones or when they're going through difficult times? Because I have come to realize that through my belief system, that is what gives me hope. I'm able to believe that there is a higher power that helps me when I cry out for help. So for them, when they lose a loved one or they go through a difficult situation, how do they approach that? How do they emotionally cope with that? Rick?
Yes, I understand that religion can give people a crutch to lean on, and understanding that there is no afterlife, that the person has ceased to exist and that one will never meet them again, is tough. And without the crutch of faith, yes, it is more difficult. I will absolutely grant you that. It's just a case of, do we believe in reality, or do we want to have comforting myths that help to sustain us? I would like to say that atheists and various stripes, we prefer reality to fantasy, even if the reality is hard and difficult to bear. I lost my late wife in July 2022, and we had a ceremony to celebrate her life. We had people there from all the contributions she had made, and it still does hurt. But it's a case of, do I want to have a fantasy that sustains me, or would I rather, even if it's tough and difficult, accept reality?
Yeah, I'm so sorry to hear about your wife, Rick. Here's another WhatsApp voice note that has come through.
Good morning, Clement, and your guest. Yes, I'm from the township, and as you can imagine, a majority of us were raised Christian. I was raised Christian, but then after observing what was happening around, even in my church, the terrible things that people who claim to be believers and who stand for the good they were doing. And then after reading books like Richard Dawkins, The God Delusion, and stuff like that, all of that led me to now being an agnostic. It can be a challenge. In my workplace, I'm surrounded by Christians, majority, if not all, my colleagues at family, and you get judged. People sort of think it's an anathema that you no longer believe in a God or in God. Yeah, it could be, but that's where I'm standing at the moment.
Rick, is that your experience as well? That atheists are still very much stigmatized in our society, in our families, where constantly you're being judged about the decision you've taken and the views that you hold?
Yes. As a professional person, I haven't experienced much of that, but many of our members and supporters, people who come to our meetups and fraternize with us, say that this is the only place, or that is the only place that they can be themselves and speak freely, because they are, as your caller said, judged, stigmatized, etc., because they don't hold the majority belief. I should add that in places like Europe, for example, non-believers are close to a majority. So there, it's perfectly natural. You don't believe in religion, fine, and nobody cares about it or worries about it. In South Africa, we're a bit behind the curve, and hence the need for something like a secular society. It would seem weird to have a group of people who get together because of what they don't believe. So there would be no need for it, and our various programs to try and make people aware of secularism, of non-belief, and that it's a perfectly acceptable thing in society. That's why we've still got work to do in South Africa.
Yeah. Okay, let me wrap up with a message from Fiti, who says, "Hey Clem, I once asked a minister, a priest, in brackets, if he believed in hell, and his answer was, I believe we make our own hell on earth." That's really something that stuck with me, and perhaps could help others understand that hopefully we're all moral people at heart. That's a message there from Fiti. Another one on the WhatsApp line says, "Hey Clement, please can you ask Rick there, do atheists and agnostics believe in faith, the concept of faith, because most belief systems have a take on faith?" Rick?
Yes. We say of faith that faith is pretending to know what you don't know. So we're busy establishing a thing called the Free From Faith hotline, where people can call in and discuss the fact that they no longer have faith. We don't regard faith as a good thing, rather as a fantasy and a palliative, something that people are grasping because they don't feel strong enough to accept the reality that there's no heaven, there's no hell, there's no God.
All right, Rick, thank you so much for making time for us. I really appreciate it. Rick Raubenheimer is the president of the South African Secular Society. I thought we should bring in someone who is atheist or agnostic, because we've looked at other belief systems, and they also have their own beliefs or non-beliefs, depending on which way you want to define it. But they don't think anything does actually happen after we die. So next week, we'll bring in other people who will share with us what their belief system is.